I never thought I'd lose everything at 73, not after working 45 years at the same manufacturing plant in Greenville, South Carolina, not after saving every penny I could, not after paying off my little house by the Reedy River 10 years early. The warnings came 5 days before it happened. Hurricane Melissa had devastated Florida and was moving north, weakening to a tropical storm, but still carrying devastating rainfall. The meteorologists kept saying parts of the Carolinas could see unprecedented flooding, but those were just words on a TV screen. I'd lived through storms before. My house had stood for 60 years through everything nature threw at it. "Dad, you need to come stay with us," my son Michael told me over the phone. "They're evacuating your zone." "It's just some rain," I said, looking out at the darkening sky. "The house has never flooded before." "This isn't like before," Michael insisted. "They're saying 20 inches of rain. The river's going to crest 15 feet above flood stage." I remember laughing at that. 15 feet? Impossible. "I'll be fine, son. I've got my supplies. Power might go out, but I've got my generator." There was a long silence on the phone. "Dad, please. Mom would have wanted you to be safe." The mention of Clara, gone 5 years now, almost changed my mind. But this house held all my memories of her. The garden she'd planted out back. The kitchen where she'd taught me to make her mother's biscuits after she got sick, knowing I'd need to learn. I couldn't leave it. "I'll call if it gets bad," I promised. The rain started that night, a steady drumming on the roof that continued through the next day and the next. By the third morning, the Reedy River had risen to the edge of my backyard. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee cup in hand, watching the muddy water inch closer to Clara's garden. That's when the power went out. I tried to start the generator, but water had already reached the garage. The rising river was moving faster than anyone predicted, swallowing land that had never been underwater in all my years there. I called Michael, but the cell towers were down. The landline gave nothing but a dead tone. I packed a small bag, some clothes, my medications, Clara's photo album, and the wooden box with her jewelry, just in case. By noon, water was seeping under my back door. An emergency alert blared on my phone, ordering immediate evacuation. I decided it was time to leave, but when I opened my front door, the street had become a fast-moving river carrying branches and debris. My car, parked in the driveway, already had water up to the wheel wells. I closed the door, heart pounding. I was trapped. The water rose inch by inch, first covering my ankles, then my calves. I moved what I could to higher surfaces, photo albums, important papers, Clara's quilts. I kept thinking the water would stop rising, but it didn't. By nightfall, I was standing on my kitchen counter, watching the murky water swirl through my living room, lifting furniture, carrying away books and cushions. The family Bible floated past, pages spreading open like wings before it sank. In the dim light of my flashlight, I watched everything I owned being consumed by the flood. The waterline crept up the walls, erasing the pencil marks where I'd measured Michael's height as a boy, covering the spot where Clara and I had hung our wedding photo, rising toward the ceiling as if determined to erase every trace of my life. I spent that night on top of my refrigerator, the highest place I could find, clutching my small bag of possessions, listening to the creaks and groans of my house as water attacked its foundation. I didn't sleep. I prayed, not just for myself but for my neighbors, for everyone caught in this disaster. I wondered if Michael and his family were safe on higher ground. Dawn brought no relief. The water kept rising. When it reached the countertops, I knew I couldn't stay. The rescue boats had been coming through the neighborhood. I'd heard their motors and megaphones, but none had passed close enough to my house. It was a miracle when I heard the airboat engine approaching around noon. 2 rescue workers in bright orange vests helped me climb aboard. I could only take what I could carry, my small bag, nothing else. As we pulled away, I looked back at my home. Only the roof and part of the second story were visible above the swirling brown water. "We're taking evacuees to the shelter at Greenville High," one of the rescuers told me. "No," I said, "my son lives in Highland Ridge. Can you take me there?" They exchanged a look. "Sir, We're supposed to bring everyone to the designated shelters. Please, I said. It's just a few miles north. Above the flood zone. I can't go to a shelter. I need my family. Maybe it was the tremor in my voice or the way I clutched Clara's photo album. But they relented. The boat changed course, navigating flooded streets that were unrecognizable. Landmarks I'd known for decades were transformed or simply gone, swallowed by the murky water. An hour later we reached Highland Ridge, where the streets were wet from rain but not flooded. The rescue workers helped me to the sidewalk. "You sure you'll be okay from here, sir?" one asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure of anything anymore. "Thank you for everything." I watched them motor away, then turned to face the neat row of brick homes. Michael's house was at the end of the block, a two-story colonial with white trim that he'd been so proud to afford after his promotion 5 years ago. My legs shook as I walked, from exhaustion, from fear, from the realization that everything I owned was gone. When I reached his door, I hesitated. Then I rang the bell, clutching my small bag of salvaged memories, waiting for my only child to answer. The door opened and Michael stood there in a polo shirt and khakis, like it was just another ordinary day. His eyes widened in shock. "Dad, how did you get here?" "Rescue boat," I said, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. "My house. It's gone, Michael. Everything's underwater." For a moment, his face softened with what looked like relief. He stepped onto the porch, glancing up and down the street as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" He didn't move to hug me, which struck me as odd. In the background, I could hear a television playing and the sound of dishes being put away. "I'm alive," I said. "That's about all I can say for sure." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his mother it made my chest ache. "Look, Dad, I'm glad you're safe, but this is complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, not understanding. Before he could answer, a woman's voice called from inside. "Who is it, Michael?" His wife Diane appeared behind him, her face freezing when she saw me standing there, soaking wet and clutching my pathetic bag of salvaged memories. "Robert?" she said, her voice lacking any warmth. We'd never been close, Diane and I. Clara had tried to bridge that gap when she was alive, but after she passed, the distance between Diane and me had only grown. "His house flooded," Michael explained. "He came here instead of going to the shelter." I noticed how he said he instead of Dad, as if I were a stranger. Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at me, then at Michael, then back at me. "We're not set up for guests right now." "I don't need much," I said. "Just a corner to sleep in until the waters recede." Michael and Diane exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. Then Michael sighed and stepped aside. "Come in, but just temporarily, until we figure something out." The house was immaculate as always. Gleaming hardwood floors, stainless steel appliances, everything in its place. So different from my lived-in home, with its comfortable clutter and worn furniture. I felt suddenly conscious of my muddy shoes and wet clothes. "You should take a shower," Diane said, looking me up and down. "I'll find some of Michael's clothes for you to borrow." I nodded gratefully, even though the thought of wearing my son's clothes made me feel oddly diminished. Michael showed me to the guest bathroom, handed me towels that were too plush to actually dry anything, and left me alone. Under the hot spray of the shower, I finally let myself cry. Not loud sobs, but silent tears that mixed with the water streaming down my face. I thought of Clara's garden, now underwater. The handmade Christmas ornaments from our first years together, destroyed. The recliner where I'd sat every evening since retirement, watching the world through my window, now probably floating somewhere down the reedy river. When I emerged in Michael's too big clothes, I heard voices from the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, not meaning to eavesdrop but unable to help myself. "Can't stay here, Michael. We've talked about this." Diane's voice was tense. "What am I supposed to do? He's my father. His house is underwater. There are shelters set up, or hotels. We could pay for a hotel. For how long? They're saying it could be weeks or months before people can return to that neighborhood, if ever. That's not our problem." Diane's voice lowered. "We agreed after last time. No more enabling him." "Enabling me? What was she talking about? I'd never asked them for anything, never borrowed money, never imposed. This is different, Michael argued. It's a natural disaster. Is it? Or is it poor planning? They issued evacuation orders days ago. He chose to stay. I felt my face burn with shame and anger. Yes, I'd chosen to stay, but I never expected the flood to be so devastating. No one did. He has nowhere else to go, Michael said. That's not true, and you know it. What about his sister in Ohio? Marie? They haven't spoken in 20 years. There was a long silence. Then Diane's voice, softer now. We're finally getting ahead, Michael. The promotion, the kids' college funds, our retirement. We can't afford another setback. Setback. That's what I was to them, a setback. It'll just be for a few days, Michael said, but he didn't sound convinced. I cleared my throat loudly and entered the kitchen. They both jumped slightly, looking guilty. Thank you for the shower, I said, pretending I hadn't heard anything. And the clothes. Of course, Diane said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Are you hungry? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway, not knowing what else to say. She placed a sandwich and a glass of water in front of me at their pristine kitchen island. I ate mechanically, not tasting anything. Where are the kids? I asked, noticing the silence in the house. Soccer practice, Michael said. They'll be home for dinner. I nodded. My grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, were 14 and 12 now. I saw them on holidays and birthdays, though less frequently in recent years. Michael always had some reason why visiting was inconvenient. Their schedules were too busy, the drive was too long, someone had a cold. Have you talked to your insurance company? Diane asked. I shook my head. Haven't had the chance. My phone died in the flood. You can use mine, Michael offered, sliding his cell phone across the island. I don't know the number, I admitted. It's in my files. At home. Diane sighed audibly, and I felt like a burden all over again. We'll figure it out, Michael said, but his tone lacked conviction. A car door slammed outside, followed by the sound of children's voices. The front door opened, and Emma and Tyler burst in, chattering about their day, followed by a woman I didn't recognize. Thanks for the ride, Mrs. Patterson, Diane called. The woman waved and left. The children froze when they saw me. Grandpa? Emma said, surprise in her voice. What are you doing here? His house flooded, Michael explained before I could answer. He'll be staying with us for a little while. Tyler approached cautiously. Did you lose everything? His directness, so typical of 12-year-olds, made me smile despite myself. Almost everything, but I'm okay. Where will you go after? Emma asked, always practical, even as a child. I looked at Michael, not knowing how to answer. We'll figure that out later, he said quickly. Go wash up for dinner. But the children disappeared upstairs, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. I can sleep on the couch, I offered. The guest room is fine, Diane said, though her tone suggested it wasn't. Dinner was a strained affair. The children asked questions about the flood, which I answered as gently as possible, not wanting to frighten them with the reality of how close I'd come to drowning in my own home. Michael and Diane said little, exchanging glances whenever they thought I wasn't looking. After dinner, I offered to help with dishes, but Diane declined. I retreated to the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, feeling like a stranger. I unpacked my small bag, arranging Clara's photo album and jewelry box on the nightstand. So little to show for 73 years of life. Through the wall I could hear Michael and Diane talking in their bedroom, their voices rising and falling. I couldn't make out the words, but the tension was clear. I was causing problems just by existing, by needing help at a time when I had nowhere else to turn. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what I'd overheard earlier. What had Diane meant by after last time and no more enabling him? When had I ever been a burden to them before? And then, like a flash of lightning, a memory surfaced. 5 years ago, after Clara died, I'd fallen into a deep depression, barely eating, rarely leaving the house. Michael had come by daily to check on me, bringing groceries, making sure I took my medication. Had that been a burden to them? Had my grief cost them something I didn't know about? Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The silence was deafening after days of constant drumming on the roof. I wondered if the waters were receding yet, or if they were still rising, claiming more homes, more memories, more lives. In the morning, I decided I would call Marie. 20 years was a long time to hold a grudge over an inheritance dispute. Maybe she would take me in until I could rebuild. Maybe it was time to swallow my pride. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on here, something Michael and Diane weren't telling me, something that made my presence in their home more complicated than just an unexpected guest during a crisis. I woke to the sound of hushed voices and the aroma of coffee. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar curtains, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back. The flood, my destroyed home, my strained welcome at Michael's house. The digital clock on the nightstand read 7:30 a.m. I'd slept longer than usual, exhaustion finally overcoming the discomfort of unfamiliar surroundings. I dressed in yesterday's borrowed clothes and made my way to the kitchen. Michael sat alone at the island, staring into a coffee cup. When he saw me, he straightened, a forced smile appearing on his face. "Morning, Dad. Sleep okay?" "Fine," I lied. "Where is everyone?" "Diane took the kids to school." He pushed a mug toward me. "Coffee?" I nodded gratefully and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy with all the things we weren't saying. "FEMA's set up a disaster recovery center at the convention center," Michael said finally. "We should go there today. Get you registered for assistance." "Okay," I agreed, then trying to sound casual. "I was thinking I might call Marie, see if I could stay with her for a while." Michael's eyebrows shot up. "Aunt Marie? Really? It's been 20 years. Maybe it's time to put the past behind us." He nodded slowly. "Maybe so." Another silence fell between us. I sipped my coffee, gathering courage. "Michael, I overheard something yesterday. Diane said something about after last time, and enabling me. What did she mean by that?" Michael's face flushed. He set his mug down carefully, avoiding my eyes. "It's nothing, Dad. It's not nothing. I've never asked you for anything, never been a burden. At least, I didn't think I had." He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, that gesture so like Clara's again. "It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is." Michael stood abruptly and walked to the window, looking out at the neat suburban street. When he spoke, his voice was tight. "5 years ago, after Mom died, I took out a loan to help you keep the house." I stared at his back, uncomprehending. "What are you talking about? I never asked for money." He turned to face me. "You were going to lose the house, Dad. You'd stopped making payments during Mom's illness. The bank was threatening foreclosure." "That's not true," I protested. But even as the words left my mouth, memories surfaced. The stack of unopened mail, the calls I'd ignored. The fog of grief after Clara passed that had made everyday tasks impossible. "I handled it," Michael continued. "I thought you knew. I assumed Mom had told you how bad things had gotten financially during her treatments." My mind raced back. Clara had managed our finances. She'd assured me everything was fine, that her insurance covered most costs. Had she been protecting me from the truth? "How much?" I whispered. $60,000. I took a second mortgage on our house. The number hit me like a physical blow. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried, Dad. You were so deep in grief. You barely registered anything I said. After a while, it seemed kinder to let you believe everything was okay." I remembered those dark months after Clara died, the days I couldn't get out of bed, the times Michael had come by, talking about insurance and paperwork while I nodded blankly. "I thought I'd paid off the house 10 years ago," I said weakly. "You had. But then Mom got sick, and there were experimental treatments the insurance wouldn't cover. You took out a new mortgage to pay for them." Another memory. Clara insisting on one last treatment option, even though the doctors had said it was a long shot. Me, signing papers without reading them, desperate to try anything. "I didn't know," I said, my voice breaking. "Mom made me promise not to burden you with it if something happened to her. She knew how proud you were, how important the house was to you." I felt as if the floor were tilting beneath me. All these years, believing I'd been financially independent, when in reality my son had been carrying a debt I'd unknowingly created. That's why Diane said, I couldn't finish the sentence. Michael nodded. We've been working to pay it off. It's been hard, especially with the kids getting older, college costs looming. We've had to cut back, take fewer vacations, work overtime. And now I've lost the house anyway, I said, the irony hitting me. All that sacrifice for nothing. Michael's expression softened. It wasn't for nothing, Dad. It gave you 5 more years of independence, of living in the home you shared with Mom. I don't regret it. But I could see in his eyes that Diane did regret it, that she saw my arrival on their doorstep as history repeating itself, another financial burden they couldn't afford. I'll call Marie, I said firmly. I'll find somewhere else to go. Dad, that's not... I've done enough damage, I interrupted. I won't be responsible for more. The front door opened, and Diane entered carrying shopping bags. She stopped when she saw us, sensing the tension. Everything okay? I told him, Michael said simply. Understanding crossed her face. She set the bags down and approached me cautiously. Robert, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. We never meant to keep secrets. But you did, I said, more harshly than I intended, both of you. We thought it was for the best, she replied, and honestly we were embarrassed. Struggling financially isn't something people talk about openly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the cold, judgmental woman I'd imagined, but someone who had been carrying a burden alongside my son, someone who had every right to be wary of my sudden appearance on their doorstep. I didn't know, I repeated. I would never have deliberately put that on you. I know that, she said quietly, but intentions aside, the reality is what it is. An uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. Finally, Michael spoke. Let's go to the FEMA Center. See what assistance you qualify for. Then we can figure out next steps. I nodded numbly. As we prepared to leave, I moved as if in a dream, overwhelmed by revelations that had upended my understanding of the last 5 years. At the convention center, chaos reigned. Hundreds of flood victims lined up at tables staffed by harried FEMA workers. The air was thick with anxiety and desperation. We waited 3 hours before reaching a caseworker, a tired-looking woman named Jeanette. Your house is in the Riverside area? She asked, typing into her computer. That's Zone A. Complete inundation, I'm afraid. Will I be able to go back? I asked. She shook her head grimly. Not to live, no. The county's already talking about converting the worst-hit areas to wetlands. Buyouts for homeowners. Buyouts? Michael leaned forward. How much? Pre-flood market value, minus any outstanding mortgage. I glanced at Michael. There's still a mortgage. Jeanette nodded sympathetically. Then the bank gets paid first. You'll get whatever's left. We filled out mountains of paperwork, applied for immediate assistance, temporary housing vouchers, insurance claim support. By the time we left, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. What now? I asked as we drove back to Michael's house. Now we wait for the FEMA assistance to come through. I'll help you file the insurance claims tomorrow. And then? Michael gripped the steering wheel tightly. Then we figure it out. Together. When we returned home, Diane had dinner waiting. The atmosphere was different. Not warm exactly, but honest. The pretense had been stripped away. After dinner, Emma brought her laptop to the table. Grandpa, look what I found, she said, turning the screen toward me. It was a fundraising page titled, Help Robert Rebuild After Losing Everything in Hurricane Melissa. What's this? I asked, bewildered. I made it, she explained proudly. People make these when bad things happen. It's called crowdfunding. I put it on social media and asked everyone to share it. I stared at the screen. There was a photo of me, one Michael must have provided, and a brief explanation of my situation. Below that, a list of names and donations. You've raised $3,000 already, Emma said excitedly. Since this morning. I looked at Michael and Diane, who seemed as surprised as I was. Emma, you should have asked before doing something like this, Diane began, but I interrupted her. It's incredible, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Emma. Later, alone in the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed thinking about everything I'd learned, the financial burden my son had shouldered without complaint, the strain it had put on his marriage, the generosity of strangers responding to Emma's fundraiser. There was a gentle knock at the door. Michael entered, carrying a phone. "Marie's on the line," he said. "She wants to talk to you." I took the phone with trembling hands. "Marie?" "Robert," my sister's voice came through, older but familiar. "Michael told me what happened. I'm so sorry." "Thank you," I managed to say. "I've been thinking," she continued. "I have a mother-in-law suite that's just sitting empty since Frank's mother passed. If you wanted, you could stay here while you figure things out." 20 years of silence, broken by disaster. "Are you sure?" "Family is family," she said simply. "We've wasted too many years already." After we hung up, I looked at Michael, who had waited quietly. "She offered me a place to stay," I said. He nodded. "I thought she might. Are you going to accept?" "I don't know." I hesitated. "Would it be better for you if I did?" Michael sat beside me on the bed. "Dad, I want you to do what's best for you, not what you think is best for me. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. You're my father." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "But maybe this is a chance to reconnect with Marie, to build something new out of this disaster." I thought about it. Ohio was far from South Carolina, far from the life I'd built. But that life was underwater now. Perhaps it was time for a fresh start. "I think I'll go," I said finally. "Just until I figure out the insurance and the FEMA buyout. Then we'll see." Michael nodded, relief and sadness mingling in his eyes. "We'll help you get there, and you can come back any time. I'd like to visit, be a proper grandfather to Emma and Tyler. They'd like that." We sat in silence for a moment, the air between us clearer than it had been in years. "Michael," I said finally, "when I showed up at your door yesterday, what were you going to say?" "What do you mean?" "I heard you tell Diane what I said when I arrived. When the flood destroyed my house, I went to my son's door. He said, 'You already lived your life, my—'" "What were you going to say next?" Michael looked away, embarrassed. "It doesn't matter now. It matters to me." He sighed deeply. "I was going to say, you already lived your life. My family needs to live theirs." But I couldn't say it. Not when I saw your face. The words hurt, but I understood them better now. They came not from callousness, but from a man trying to protect his family from another financial setback they couldn't afford. "I'm sorry," I said, "for all of it." "Don't be sorry, Dad. Just be part of our lives again. The real you, not the version that pretends everything is fine when it isn't." I thought of Clara, hiding our financial troubles to protect me, of Michael doing the same, of how pride had kept me from seeing the truth. "I can do that," I promised. 3 days later, Michael and Diane drove me to the airport. Emma and Tyler hugged me tightly, making me promise to video call them every weekend. As I boarded the plane to Ohio, I carried with me Clara's photo album, her jewelry box, and something new, the knowledge that sometimes losing everything is the only way to see what was hidden beneath the surface all along. The floodwaters had taken my house, my possessions, my illusions of independence, but they had also washed away the secrets and silences that had separated me from my family. As the plane rose above the clouds, I realized that at 73, I wasn't just surviving a disaster, I was beginning again.